Neutral Ground Artist-Run Center presents contemporary visual and media art. Located on Treaty 4 Territory Regina, the traditional territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We connect audiences to the work of emerging and mid-career artists, primarily from Saskatchewan and Canada.
My name is Lauren Chipeur, and I'm an artist based in Calgary, Alberta on Treaty 7 territory. Despite the fact that both my parents and many family members have lived in Saskatchewan at one time or another, I had not spent time here until I started this project. The Weight of Being Held is an installation I've been working on for a little over a year. The title is inspired by the act of holding something collected, like a bucket of clay carried down a hill. It started in 2019 with a trip to see whooping cranes on their migration south with my maternal grandmother. My grandmother is an avid birder. Despite having lived in Saskatchewan on 2 different occasions, she had never seen a whooping crane. I became interested in spending this time with her because I was thinking about how birding is a way of collecting without taking. Collecting in this case is about the act of observation and memory. This became a contrast to my own practice, which typically relies on collecting materials in some form. In the end, we spotted several whooping cranes. Alongside this, I was also reflecting on industrial resource extraction as a form of collecting and a dominant activity in the Canadian prairies, from potash to bitumen. After this trip with her, I collected 25 different clays in southern Alberta and Saskatchewan. I settled on 2 clays and continued to work with them for the project. In order to work with the clay, I was seeking out a form that somehow connected to my relationship with my grandmother. I chose this dish bin because it was the most mass-produced object that not only reminded me of my grandmother, but also said something about her relationship to material. She uses this same dish bin in her sink at home, and often when camping. It is a very controlled space to the point that I think she would rather wash a dish for you than allow you to contaminate her system. She comes from a generation that grew up during the Depression, and for her, in the interior of BC. There is a frugality that I think in today's society would be considered political, but for her, I think it is influenced by a resourcefulness born out of scarcity. In the show, you will see the repetition of this dish bin in different clays. Working on this form was a way for me to experiment with different materials while always returning to this shape for cohesion. I think the other forms you see in the show are really influenced by my imagination and experience of being in the landscape. The things I was seeing, but also perhaps the essence of those things. The large metal form reminds me of different metal structures you see for farming, or the circular motion of plowing the land, but it also reminds me of monkey bars at a playground. Some of the works in the show have different kinds of pills and supplements fired in the kiln. One of my entry points into ceramics was realizing that all the materials in the glaze lab were the same minerals I was absorbing from food or were present in medications or cosmetics. I remember reading the label of the shampoo bottle in the shower and seeing titanium dioxide. It made me think about this connection between the geological materials and my own body, blurring the line between the mineral and biological world. It also made me think about human waste and how our bodies are also filters for what we leave in the world. I often think about putting on sunscreen and going swimming. I imagine the zinc in the sunscreen merging with the water and then settling in a new location, perhaps at the bottom of a lake.
Hi, I'm Jessica Slipp. I'm an artist currently living and working in Chipeur, otherwise known as the City of Montreal, which is situated on the unceded traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka people. The show at Neutral Ground I'm presenting is called With and Of, Becoming Rock. It's a series of videos that I've been working on since 2018 that explore the relationship between body and earth through the repeated action of my body engaging with the land in various places. These places are anywhere from natural to industrial, rural to urban, and anywhere in between. I'm interested in what we see, what we notice, and how we perceive it, the ways that place and identity are embedded in the land through geological, ecological, and human histories. I'm also interested in how we understand the landscape as a whole to our own existence within the world, from the tiny particles of matter that randomly composed what we call nature, or the earth, and the fact that we embody these very particles, and therefore nature too. We are nature too. So these performances use video as a way of documenting what I like to call site-specific interventions that use the action of becoming a rock as a way to try to break down the more dominant perceptions of nature, matter, and the human body, or the dominant perspective that there is a difference between nature, matter, and the human body. I believe that in this time of social and ecological crisis, it is vitally important to shift anthropocentric modes of thinking about the world to a more caring and compassionate way of thinking with the world, not seeing ourselves as separate from it or more powerful than it, as seeing ourselves as something that exists entirely within it, and to see that interconnection, that system between everything. So Donna Haraway, I have to mention because she's a huge influence of mine. She has described this epoch, which is now being called the Anthropocene, which is a controversial term, but she describes this epoch as one in which the effects of our species are literally written into the rocks. So rocks for me are something that have long had a mythology, a personal mythology, sort of that comes from being a child and being fascinated with rocks, walking along the shorelines with my grandmother and collecting them and sort of seeing them as a way of having these tiny pieces of time, of compacted earth and time in your hand. And then in reading Haraway and sort of this idea of this history being written into the rocks, of human history being written into the rocks, it became a really important form for me to work with. So yeah, as I say, Haraway is a huge influence of mine, and after reading her book, Staying with the Trouble, I began thinking about this idea of what she says, repatterning ways of thinking in a time of urgency. So moving away from thinking about the world to thinking with it. So in the world we are of, that we are composed of, that we embody. So yeah, these videos have become sort of a practice for me, a kind of meditation. When I'm in these different spaces, I'm trying to be with, I'm trying to think with and become a part of the landscape in a way that I am aware is physically impossible, but is like a really honest gesture to me to try and merge. I see each repeated attempt as an absurd, genuine, awkward, and honest gesture to engage with.